Okay, hello. Good morning to everyone in Malaysia. Good afternoon to everyone in Malaysia. Good morning to everyone in the UK, and welcome. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm David Rogers, and I'm the head of international resource management at the UK-based charity WRAP. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the session today, and thank the British High Commission, Blue Hope, DAFRA Cocoa for all of the great work that they're doing. The British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur has been a great assistance to me in my work tackling plastics in Malaysia and in the wider region. So in this session, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the Plastic Pact. Now, the Plastic Pact is a model which has been adopted around the world as a way of everybody coming together to tackle the issue of plastic. And there's so much good work going on to tackle what is a big international problem. This is one way that we can draw all of that effort together and make sure that we're all working in the same direction for the same purpose and not scattering our efforts around and duplicating things. I'll talk a little bit also about how both Malaysia and the wider region can benefit from taking this kind of approach. Now, first of all, the first thing to say is that the Plastic Pact is really about driving a circular economy in plastics, meaning that plastics remains in the economy and doesn't end up in the environment. The circular economy it's a phrase that gets used quite a lot, quite a new phrase, and people don't always understand it. So what I'm going to do now is just introduce my colleague Juliet from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and she will talk to you a little bit about what the circular economy means and how plastics packs fit in with the circular economy.
Innovations and business models that design our waste, keep materials in use, and protect and restore our natural environment. We need a circular economy for plastic, in which we eliminate all the problematic and unnecessary items we don't need, innovate so that everything we do need is reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and then we circulate all the items we use to keep them in the economy and out of the environment. And through the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment, launched in 2018 in partnership with the United Nations Environment Programme, more than 450 organisations from around the world have already signed up to work towards this vision of a circular economy for plastic, with concrete 2025 targets in place and annual public reporting on the progress made. And this is a really important step. However, realising this ambitious vision will require unprecedented levels of collaboration, and not just globally, but also at national and regional levels, to ensure that solutions to plastic pollution are tailored to a variety of local contexts. And this is where the Foundation's Plastics Pact network comes in. It is a globally aligned response to plastic waste and pollution that enables vital knowledge sharing and coordinated action towards solutions that work in specific regional contexts. And each plastics pact, whether national or regional, is led by a local, independent organisation. It brings together businesses, policymakers, and NGOs
That was great. So thank you to Juliet for that. And I hope that the video worked well for everybody. It's great to hear Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who've done so much work on the circular economy and plastics, explain exactly the role in which a plastic packs can create that kind of circular economy. And I will build on that in my presentation. So just to take you back a little bit and explain who are WRAP. Well, WRAP was set up in the UK in the year 2000 to tackle the UK's recycling sector and help it grow. The recycling rate at that time was less than 10%. We had an ambition to recycle at least 50% of the waste that was created. And it was WRAP's job to do that and make that happen. I'm pleased to say that we have managed to achieve that. We worked on a whole different range of materials, but one of the key ones throughout that whole time has been plastic. We've worked on plastic in a number of ways, finding new end markets for recycled plastic, consumer campaigns to teach people what they should do to recycle their plastic, and working with big brands and retailers to change the products that they put on the market so that we can all have a better chance of making things reused or recycled. What we learned through that whole process is that you can't fix things by just making small ad hoc changes here and there. Things like changing a product's design or doing a beach cleanup or increasing collections are all great, but they don't work if you don't join them all together. And we learned that to make a real long-term permanent change, you have to bring together all of these elements. You need government to bring in the right kind of regulatory reform and to do their bit to educate citizens about how they should be interacting with those reforms. You need businesses to think about how they develop and produce and sell products to us. We need individual citizens to know what they need to do and to play their part and be willing to do that, whether they're at home or if they're out and about. And we need waste management companies to invest in the kind of infrastructure required to take what we've used as consumers and businesses and turn it back into something useful that can go back into the economy and not into waste. And the method that we use to bring all of those people together and make sure that all the efforts are coordinated and pulling in the same direction is a voluntary agreement. It's a partnership between public and private organisations, including stakeholders from right across the value chain, all working together towards a shared goal and ambition. And what makes it really effective is that there's a really solid reporting and analysis structure that goes behind the voluntary agreement, so we know exactly where the problems are arising, what actions are being taken to address them, and what impact those actions are having. What sets it apart from a legislative approach is that it's much quicker to enact a voluntary agreement. It has a better chance of bringing businesses along because they're involved right from the start, and it's flexible to respond to changes that are happening in the market. It also provides this pre-competitive collaboration space, so that once all of the businesses have decided that we need to make a change in the way that we sell plastic or we produce plastic, they can then work together with people who they would normally compete against to figure out what change are we as a whole industry going to make that will have a long-term impact. And they can deliver real change on the ground and very quickly. And we have lots of evidence over the last 20 years to show how effective these can be. So in 2018, when we got together with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and DEFRA and British government to look at how we would accelerate the work on plastics in the UK, the natural thing was to pull together a plastics voluntary agreement. And so we worked with all of our partners to develop the UK Plastics Pact. The UK Plastic Pact, which launched just over 2 years ago, brings together over 80 businesses, which together represent more than 90% of the plastic placed on the UK market, to agree a set of stretching targets that we can all work together and all play our part in achieving, so that we can take plastic out of the environment and keep it in the economy. Together with those partners, we agreed a set of goals, and the goals were designed very specifically to drive the circularity. So we agreed that by 2025, all of the plastic packaging that was put on the market in the UK would be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And that is a huge change. That really enables the recycling industry to go out and confidently collect that material and put it into the facilities, knowing that they can turn out a high quality product. And that led us to the second target, which is that by 2025, 70% of the plastic placed on the market is effectively collected and recycled. We were starting from a baseline of around 40%. So it's a roughly 30% increase by 2025. And that's quite challenging because the low-hanging fruit, the easy to recycle material is already being collected and recycled in quite good volumes. So this was about pushing the boundaries and collecting and recycling the more difficult materials, or making materials that were difficult more recyclable by changing the way they're formatted. And that brings in government and local government in the collection, as well as industry in developing the right kind of facilities to create a high quality output that people will buy. And that leads to the third target, which is that by 2025, any new plastic packaging placed on the market should include 30% recycled content. That then drives a demand for the product being produced by the recycling industry, and means that they have an economic incentive to invest in new facilities and new technologies and produce a very high quality product. So those three targets in themselves drive a circular economy in plastics. And beyond that, the fourth target was about eliminating all of the problematic single-use items which could not go into the other three targets. So these are things like straws, expanded polystyrene packaging, things that you can't make 100% recyclable, or at least on an economically acceptable basis. And so we need to just get those out of the system altogether. So by linking the targets really carefully like this, it actually drives that kind of economy and means that there won't be such a need for government investment and effort by citizens and businesses in future. We will actually create a system where what is placed on the market is recyclable. It actually gets collected and recycled. That content goes back into new material, and we create the cycle all the way around again, the very essence of the circular economy. So by having all of the right people together and having some very clear actions that mean that everybody is pulling in the same direction, people are not going off and trying to fix the problem with ad hoc actions that they come up with by themselves. And we've seen some examples of that happening for sure around the world. By having everyone together and focusing in the same direction, it allowed us to write a comprehensive roadmap of how we get from 2018 to 2025. And that roadmap is populated with actions, real, deliverable, measurable actions, which mean that we know that we're making progress towards the ultimate goal. And once we have the roadmap in place and the structure of the plastic pact in place, it allows us to then gather together the people that we need to influence those actions. So we set up working groups aligned to each of the targets and set them the goal of working out how we're going to achieve the actions that we've set ourselves. So how do we make things in a more recyclable format? What kind of guidance do we need to give to industry when they're creating their plastic bottles or trays or bags to make those more recyclable? How do we identify what are the problematic and unnecessary items that we want to remove from the market? And how do we engage businesses to actually go and do that? And I'll show you later, we've had some great success with retailers and brands removing things from the market. And then working with local authorities, how do we get the collections infrastructure to match the ambition of that 70%? And I know from my discussions in Malaysia, this is one of the big talking points. How do we align the local collections infrastructure to this ambition to collect and recycle more plastic. And each of these groups will then take an action, go away, deliver it, and then bring that back to the group. And when there's an answer to the question, then it's shared with everybody. So not everybody has to be working on this on their own. This is a supportive and effective way of helping businesses and governments achieve their ambitions. As I mentioned, one of the great things about Plastics Pact is that we measure the progress. This is not about just signing up to some goals and then going away and making a few actions of your own, but and then no one really knows what the impact of that is. We very carefully measure everything that happens so that we know where are the problems arising, where are the biggest impacts going to be had, and what progress are we making against those. And we do it in a number of ways. But the most obvious and the most public is that we ask each of the members of the Plastics Pact to make public pledges to say what they will do against each of the 4 targets. And these are published on our website so that the media, public, competitors, everyone can see this, and businesses are then held to account for the actions that they've outlined. So if you're a big drinks company or a big food company or a big homeware products company, what can you do to take away unnecessary and problematic plastics from your products and from your stores? What can you do to change the way that the products you place on the market are formulated so that they can be recycled? You know, if it's a bottle, does the fact that the cap is made of a different material mean the whole bottle can't be recycled? In which case, could you change the way that cap is made? Could you change the way that labels are put on your product so that the labels don't become something that prevents the recycling of the product? And in target 3, what can you do as a business? Maybe you can do something to invest in recycling infrastructure or a deposit return scheme, or you're going to collect the material that you put on the market or invest in new recycling technology. What can you do to ensure that there's an effective collection and recycling of material? And when you're specifying new products, can you specify that 30% recycled content? If you're making PET bottles, could you push that up to 100% so that we can increase the average across all products for those who are producing something in a different polymer, which is more difficult to include recycled content in? And so you end up with a list of actions and pledges made by businesses. And here's just a couple of examples that I took at random from the list. You know, you can see that people like Lucozade and Marks and Spencer's have made pledges against all of those targets. And then after a year, we asked all of those businesses to repopulate this with what they have actually done. So you can see that Marks and Spencer's have eliminated single-use plastic products. They've launched a recycled take-back scheme in their shops. And they've included 95% recycled content in all of their bags, which are posted out for home delivery. And each of the members has made great strides. And by publishing this information, we actually got a really positive media reaction for all of those businesses that showed they had done something. And in fact, it was the businesses who hadn't publicly pledged to do something that got the negative media response. And so I think that helped to then recruit a lot more businesses to the Plastic Pact after the first year, which was great, because one of the things that everybody feared was that by going public, the businesses would receive negative publicity. But it just hasn't worked out that way. It's been completely the opposite. This has been a real success from a public relations point of view. And behind all of that public reporting is a whole load of reporting which the public doesn't get to see, which is where we ask businesses to tell us exactly how many items of plastic packaging they placed on the market this year, what were they made of, what was the recycled content in there, how many adhere to the design for recyclability guidelines that we published, and how much money have they spent on making changes. So a whole load of comprehensive data from businesses that only WRAP gets to see. But that allows us to analyze the progress of the whole plastics market and identify things like these headline figures that we're able to publish. So we know from that data that 1.1 billion items of single-use unnecessary plastic have been identified by our members to be removed from the market in this coming year. 1.1 billion items that will no longer be in circulation. It's incredible. We also know that there's been over £100 million of investment in new recycling capacity, providing 450,000 tonnes a year of new recycling capacity for the UK. And that is specifically to feed the demand for that 30% recycled content that comes from the plastic pack target. And that's created job opportunities and investment in regions in the UK which needed jobs and investment. So it's been a great example of local economic benefit coming from this. We also know that retailers are already taking action. So they have taken away unrecyclable black plastic from 19,000 tonnes worth of product packaging, the equivalent of 1.5 billion ready meal trays taken out of the non-recyclable pile that would have gone to incineration or landfill and made into a recyclable product that can go back into a circular economy. And we're pretty bad in the UK at putting our fresh produce in plastic bags and plastic wrap. But working with the retailers, we've been able to remove 3,400 tonnes of plastic packaging from fresh produce, the equivalent of taking 272 London buses worth of plastic out of waste, because that is often non-recyclable material. So you can see just in a short period, the plastic pact has had a huge impact. And we can see that businesses are taking individual actions as well. Now, one of the things that people say is, would the businesses have just taken actions on their own without the plastic pact? And yes, there is an element of that. But what the plastic pact does is make sure that the actions that businesses take are actually aligned to those targets. So you don't have one business that decides to ban all plastics, another that decides to make all of its plastics from biodegradable material, one that decides to make all of its plastics from some other kind of new material. And therefore, we don't get the scale and the system-wide change that we need to make real impact. So you can see early on things like McDonald's ditched their plastic straws, Asda ditched their carrier bags and straws, and they actually removed several million straws from their in-store and their canteens. Marks and Spencer's moved from bagged to loose produce. Morrison's ditched plastic from its pizzas and meat and ready meals. Marks and Spencer's, which used to give out single-use plastic cutlery when you bought a ready meal or a salad or a yogurt or something from Marks and Spencer's for lunch, it's now replaced that with more sustainable wooden cutlery. And working alongside the Plastic Pact, the government has announced that it will ban single-use stirrers and straws. And then in terms of making sure that all the plastic that are placed on the market is recyclable, Waitrose and a lot of other retailers have actually moved away from black plastic in their ready meals and many other products, and moved to coloured plastic, which can be recycled. So for people who don't know, black plastic can't be recognised by the lasers in the recycling plants, and therefore it gets rejected and put into landfill. Coloured plastic can be recognised by the recycling industry, and therefore it goes into recycling. But that isn't appropriate to all businesses. So we worked with Unilever to develop a new kind of black plastic which could be recycled and recognized. So it has pigments in there that can be recycled, that can be recognized and that can be recycled. And to avoid confusion, we worked with the industry to say that if an item of black plastic packaging is going to be put on the market now, it will use this new approach which Unilever has revealed. And therefore, we're able to say that black plastic, when it's placed on the market now, is actually recyclable, knowing that it either has been replaced where it couldn't be recyclable, or it's been replaced with the new type of detectable black plastic. And that is a huge change in the UK. We've seen other things too. So packaging has been changed to make it more recyclable. Coca-Cola, with its Sprite brand, used to produce a green bottle, and that was iconic, part of the whole Sprite brand. The trouble with green PET bottles is that they're not worth anything. The green PET doesn't have an economic value, and therefore it wasn't being recycled. Clear PET has a very high economic value, and so by switching from the green bottle to a clear bottle, Coca-Cola made millions of bottles become part of the recycling. And not only did they make the change, but they spent a lot of money advertising the change as well to the public, so that the public would understand what was happening to the product on the shelf and see that they were contributing to a more recyclable, circular economy. And other brands have designed trigger sprays and caps and bottles that make their product more recyclable. And alongside that, some of the supermarkets before the COVID-19 outbreak were trialing plastic-free loose produce, which you could come and bring your own container to the store and fill up. So that was taking plastic out. We hope that we'll see that come back when the COVID situation has improved itself. And what can industry do to help with that 70% effectively recycled and collected target? Well, a lot of it is about messaging to consumers. So you can see here, big brands like Evian, Coca-Cola, Hovis, putting messages on their products to tell people this can be recycled. Please recycle it. And that's the swoosh sign with the heart links to the Recycle Now campaign, which WRAP runs, which will tell people, can their product be recycled in the local area where they live? And we've seen brands spend large amounts of their marketing spend on encouraging people to recycle. Probably the boldest of all of them is Coca-Cola's public commitment, don't buy Coca-Cola if you're not going to help us recycle, which is really a very bold public statement. And we've seen a big growth in recycled content. The average across the UK when we started was 10%, and so we're going to push that up to 30%. So Ecover, which is a Unilever brand of ecological products, cleaning products, they have launched 100% post-consumer recycled plastic bottle. And we're seeing that again across the PET bottle manufacturers, pushing up to 100% of recycled content, which is incredible, and is driving that demand for that's led to the £100 million of investment in new recycling facilities. You can see right across all of the manufacturers, whether it's bottles or it's bags, these are the items which it's possible to put a lot of recycled content into, and retailers and brands are doing that. So it's not only businesses that have a role to play. As I said, everyone has a role to play, and government has a massive part to play in that. One of the great things about having the Plastic Pact is that government is sitting around the table with industry, discussing what can industry do by itself and what requires government interventions. Through the dialogue that we had with the Plastic Pact, we were able to influence the government to name the plastic items which industry thought needed to be banned. these are things that consumers either expected and businesses would struggle to replace, or there would be a cost or a competitive disadvantage to businesses trying to do this by themselves. And therefore, it made more sense for government to announce a full-on ban. And because that was developed in dialogue with industry, industry had time to prepare themselves for those bans. And so when government announced it, it wasn't a shock which sent ripples through the industry. People were ready for that. We commissioned a full review of the extended producer responsibility scheme in the UK to increase the cost to those industries putting plastic on the market, but also increase the funding that comes back into the recycling industry, so that businesses were confident that their items were being recycled, would be recycled in return for the money they were putting into the scheme. And we worked on collections. I mentioned the importance of collections, and I know that this is a big issue in Malaysia, to make sure that people in their homes knew what bottles could go into the recycling and what plastic packaging could go into their recycling, and they know that it's going to be recycled. This is tackling one of the great negativities that sits in people's minds when it comes to the circular economy is, well, look, I take all this time to separate out my plastics and so on, and then it'll just go into landfill, it gets burnt anyway. By ensuring that that all households have similar plastic bottle and rigid plastic collections, we can then communicate across the whole country to say your plastic is being recycled, and we can be pretty sure about that. And we look at things like deposit return schemes. And one of the big drivers was a discussion on taxing packaging with less than 30% recycled content. That 30% came from the discussions that we have with industry for setting the 30% target in the Plastic Pact. Government accepted and adopted that 30%, and then instigated a public consultation on whether it would be required to have taxation to support that 30% target. And that consultation is happening at the moment. And we had a good example of this where we set out to tackle single-use carrier bags in the UK a few years ago. And we set out to do that with industry and government in the same way. We had a target of 50% reduction, and we managed to achieve that through voluntary commitments voluntary actions by industry. One retailer managed to reduce their carrier bags down by 80%, and they did it by voluntarily introducing a 5p charge. When government said to us, well, okay, so we've got to 50%, can we get to 80%? Industry said to government, well, actually, our customers probably won't accept a 5p charge unless it's the law. So we need the government now to introduce that law so that we can then implement the policy that we actually think is a good idea. So this is a really good two-way dialogue between government and industry, which means that everybody in the whole system moves together in an agreed way. And it saves all of that effort of passing legislation only to then have to enforce it, and businesses are trying to find loopholes, and it becomes a difficult thing to enforce. This is a much more effective way of doing it. I saw a question pop up about whether this only applied in the UK. But this method of bringing everyone together and agreeing the targets that are suitable for your own particular circumstances has been so popular that we've seen a growth of this around the world. In Juliet's video, she showed the plastic packs which were already launched and in operation. We're working with many more countries to develop plastic packs so that we can create this big global movement and sharing of knowledge and information. WRAP runs the UK Plastic Pact and the European Plastic Pact, the first continental plastic pact. And we've been supporting the pacts in Chile and South Africa to get them launched and operating. And we're working with Australia for a regional pact, the ANZ Pact, Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. And we're working with Kenya, Senegal and Morocco to develop further pacts across Africa. And with the help of the British High Commission, Unilever, Tesco's, Nestle's, Coca-Cola, what was Mestec, Dr. Nagu, and Minister Yobi Yim, we worked together to create a Malaysian plastic pact, and that was announced by Minister Yeo Bee Yin at the launch of the Blue Planet 2 screening back in September. And whilst I know that things have changed in Malaysia, we really remain hopeful that Malaysia will be the first Asian plastic pact and take a real leadership role in the region and be seen as a real leading light in taking this on and making it work. And I know through the WhatsApp group that I have with the founding members of the Malaysian Plastic Pact that the energy and enthusiasm is still there. And I remain really hopeful that we'll get that launched this year. So just to show that I'm not making this up, here are some screenshots from the various plastic pacts around the world. So this is the South African Plastic Pact, which was developed by ourselves, WWF, and the South African Recycling Association, supported by British High Commission, Clean Litter Fund, DEFRA, and United Nations One Planet. So a lot of people came together to make that happen. The European Plastic Pact, which WRAP runs, which was launched in March this year and has over 150 members from across Europe, including 17 national governments. The Chilean Plastic Pact, the second one to launch, where WRAP helped with the launch and with the development of their roadmap, and are now providing technical assistance to the working groups, looking particularly at reuse models, where they have some really good examples in Chile, which we're learning from and taking to the rest of the world. And in APCO in Australia, who've launched in March this year, just before the travel restrictions came in. I was in Canberra for APCO to launch the Australian, New Zealand, and Pacific Regional Plastic Pact. I was able to go to Fiji and Vanuatu and Samoa to talk to businesses and governments there about joining this regional approach, which will help to give a regional approach to working out what plastic is getting produced and moved around, and where does it end up, and how do we keep it out of the oceans. So just finally, I really remain hopeful that there will be a Malaysian Plastic Pact this year. It has a number of benefits. Obviously, the environmental benefits that we use less virgin fossil-based materials, we increase recycling, and take away the leakage into the environment. Businesses can lead this and support government to develop the right kind of policies and legislations for Malaysia through having a constructive platform where businesses can talk to each other and also to government about what is needed to make a big long-term systemic change. We've seen that £100 million of investment in the UK in new recycling infrastructure. It's a way of creating jobs and economic wealth for people, and a way of communicating with citizens that they can do their bit. Many people in many countries worry about plastic and don't feel that they have the power to make a change as a citizen. But through a plastic pact, you can tell them, we're making these changes. If you play your bit, we play our bit, and the whole thing changes. And of course, I mentioned it will be the first Asian plastic pact. So we really hope that Malaysia will play that leadership role, and through that, be a beacon of light to other countries in the area, and increase the whole collaboration across the whole region. So thank you very much. I know we have some time for questions, so I'm going to stop my screen share and look at the chat box and see what questions have come in. Yes, so any plans for this to be as an Asia collective? Yes, I mean, very much hope, as I just said, that Malaysia would be the first in the Southeast Asia region. We are also about to start work in India on an Indian Plastics Pact, and we're working on the ANZPAC Pacific region. So with the Coral Triangle, what I would really like to do is extend east from Malaysia through the Coral Triangle to link up to the Pacific work that we're doing, and then bring in countries around. We are waiting to hear about potentially funding for Vietnam for a plastic pact, Thailand as well. So it would be great, and Indonesia and the Philippines. So it would be really great to bring the whole region together, because the wider the collaboration, the more impact that we can have. And another question, is this pact only available to the retail and fast-moving consumer goods industry? The scope of Plastic Pact is really about, yes, fast-moving consumer goods, plastic packaging, so food and home care, healthcare products. It's the same mechanism we have used in tackling waste in the food industry, in the clothing industry, and the construction industry, and the hospitality industry. So it could be extended to other industry types, yes. And how should someone apply? Well, okay, that is a great question. So in Malaysia, I have some really great partners helping with this. So Malaysia Green Tech Corporation and WWF and Reef Check are all helping to put together the Malaysia Plastic Pact and the British High Commission. I believe there was a website hosted by Mestec. I'll have to find out what has happened to that, but you can contact me. So my contact details are still on the screen there. You can contact me and I'll put you in touch with someone. Or you could contact the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur, and they also have all the contacts. You'd like to watch the video again? I will endeavour to get the video. Okay, is that because the sound on the video wasn't very good? Okay, right. Let's have a go. So, go back. It may just be that the technology doesn't quite work, but let's give it a go.
My name is Juliet, and I'm part of the Ethical Foundation's New Plastics Economy initiative. I hope you can hear, and I'm sorry that I can't be with you live today, but I'd like to thank the British High Commission and Brown for giving me the opportunity to briefly speak to you about the Foundation's work on plastic. It's increasingly visible that today our plastic system is broken. Plastics are clear materials, however
Okay, so unfortunately we can't hear Juliet, but I will circulate that video to anyone that wants to hear it, and the presentation as a whole. So yeah, we can upload the video and share the link around. I'll liaise with the Blue Hope team to do that after this. Apologies for that. It's a shame. She had some really good messages on the circular economy. Okay, any final questions? I think we're almost out of time, but time for maybe one more question. No more questions? Okay, well, in which case, thank you very much. It's been great to have the opportunity to speak to you. I hope that I'll be back out in Malaysia soon when the world is able to travel again, and remain hopeful that we will have a Malaysia Plastic Pact up and running very soon. Thank you very much, everyone.